Top Democrats are seizing on the new government intelligence analysis as proof of their claims that the war in Iraq has made the terror threat to America worse. And joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut. He's a presidential candidate. Senator, thanks for coming in. You think this is accurate? This national intelligence estimate that was released today, do you have confidence in it?
Well, after the last few years, I'm a bit more skeptical than I'd like to be about these things for all the obvious reasons. Too many times the books were cooked. Information was manufactured to serve people's ideological point of view on this. But I accept the fact that here, that I'm not terribly surprised by it here, that Al-Qaeda is insurgent again. It's increasing its activities. Here it's posing additional threats. That shouldn't come as any great surprise. We've turned Iraq into an incubator here. It's become basically a recruiting camp for jihadists around that part of the world, and that's been well known for some time here. Thus, one of the reasons why many of us have drawn the conclusion that we need a different mission here.
I asked the question, is this the best judgment of the U.S. intelligence community, the professional analysts, the experts out there, or do you see fingerprints from political leaders, whether Vice President Cheney or others, in this document?
I'm not in a position to answer that question, Wolf. I listened to the interview you just had, and I'm satisfied that they're satisfied this is a pretty accurate description. And I have no reason to believe, based on other information we've received, when you're given all the information about what's happening in Iraq today, clearly our continued military presence there doesn't surprise me as increasing the activity of these elements here who are using our presence there as a way of recruiting people from throughout the region to join their efforts.
Now, the President's Homeland Security Advisor, Fran Townsend, says you're flat wrong when you said in a statement that this NIE plainly shows that our continued involvement in Iraq is making us less secure at home and abroad. She is arguing, as is the Bush administration, that the U.S. involvement in Iraq is making us more secure because the United States is fighting al-Qaeda in Iraq and preventing them from having that sanctuary, that base there from which they could launch attacks against Americans.
No, that may be the only people left in America that believe that here. Everyone else who's looked at this situation, look what's going on in the United States Senate today. Put aside the different amendments that are being offered. There's a common denominator in all of them. And the common denominator, the policy has failed. Whether you're listening to Dick Lugar, or you're listening to Ken Salazar and Lamar Alexander, or you're listening to Jack Reed and Carl Levin, almost every single amendment that's being offered differs in how they would deal with the problem, but the common denominator is the policy has failed. It's
but do you have any doubt that there's an al-Qaeda operation in Iraq?
No, of course not.
So what should the U.S. be doing about that?
Well, my view is you ought to start dealing with it as a problem there instead of pretending you're going to sort out a civil war in that country. And that they're trying to come up with an excuse for staying in Iraq militarily. I'll make my point again to you here. I think we're less secure, less safe, more vulnerable, and that's not my conclusion. That's the conclusion almost everyone else has.
But how do you fight al-Qaeda in Iraq unless you have military forces that are going to go out there and crush it?
You're going to have to fight al-Qaeda in more places than Iraq. This is, again, a stateless terrorist organization that is determined to do great damage to us here. The best way to deal with them is, of course, building those relationships internationally that will allow us to deal with them in Pakistan, where there's still most of them located, I think, in the mountains of western Pakistan here. And the assumption we're going to have to stay in Iraq because al-Qaeda is there.
So what is your solution? If you were president of the United States and you want to be president, what would you do to fight al-Qaeda in Iraq?
Well, I'd start building the relationships around the world that are going to help you deal with it effectively. There's no one single country that's going to deal with an international terrorist organization. You need a lot more cooperation than we're getting. And you're not going to get it by just focusing on Iraq, continuing to have an expanding conflict there when all we're getting is more hardship, more danger, more difficulty, and we're more isolated and less secure today. That's the conclusion. And there never was going to be a military solution in Iraq. Every single person who's looked at that, from the Baker-Hamilton report to our military leaders, have said there's not a win or a loss militarily for us in Iraq. It's a civil war between Shias and Sunnis. They have the obligation to pull together. The al-Qaeda elements are utilizing our presence there to expand their ranks and to use it as a broader base of operations. I'm not opposed to us all dealing with al-Qaeda, but you don't deal with al-Qaeda by continuing your involvement in a civil war you can't win.